people don't make their money, the airlines don't make their money off tourist travel. They make their money off people like me traveling on very expensive business and first class tickets. And so if I don't have to do that as much because I can now use Zoom or Microsoft Teams or some other platform to do half the meetings I used to, I'm not going to travel as much because businesses are setting in a new model for working. So that has some impact, indirect and direct impact on tourism that you just have to factor in. Third is cities are going to have to be more innovative about how they market themselves.
So everybody, welcome to today's installment of World Boston's Mission Persists series, Business and Tourism in the Post-COVID World. I'm Mary Eintema, President and CEO of World Boston. We are so delighted to host Zurab Pololikashvili, Secretary General of the UN World Tourism Organization, and Myron Brilliant, Executive Vice President and Head of International Affairs of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, to talk with us about business and tourism in the post-COVID world. This series, and indeed the work of World Boston, is possible because of our sponsors. So it is now my great pleasure to bring on Andrew Friendly, Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Autodesk, which is a Mission Persists 2020 ambassador sponsor. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, and thank you very much, Mary. Autodesk is thrilled to support World Boston and its mission of international engagement and global cooperation. We think these are critical not just for peace and security, but also for economic growth. Autodesk is a software company headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have more than 11,000 employees worldwide and more than 300 based in our Seaport offices in the Innovation and Design Building. In fact, the backdrop you see behind me are the robots in our tech center, our technology center in that office in the Seaport District. Our best known product is Autocad, the 2D software for architects and engineers. Today, we have industry-leading 3D products for construction, architecture, manufacturing, and for special effects teams in the media and entertainment industry. We have an amazing R&D facility at our Boston offices here in Boston, just as I mentioned, what you're seeing behind me, where our customers and researchers from universities and startups work with us on the future of design and construction. They use our robots and machinery to explore how we will design and build the housing and infrastructure of the future. Cannot wait to welcome people back to our facilities in Boston and to show you how Autodesk is helping to create the future. In the meantime, Zoom events like this one are a great way to connect, and I'm very grateful to World Boston for hosting such interesting discussions, and I'm pleased to introduce our guest today, who can hopefully tell us a little bit about when we will be able to travel again and be back in person. So to welcome our guests, let me first introduce them. Zurab Pololikashvili, the Secretary General of the UN World Tourism Organization, has been in that role since January of 2018 and joins us from Madrid. He was Ambassador of Georgia to Spain, Algeria, and Morocco, and permanent representative of Georgia to the World Tourism Organization up to December 2017. And before that, between 2009 and 2010, he was Minister of Economic Development of Georgia. We're thrilled to have him join us today. Also joining us is Myron Brilliant, who's the Executive Vice President and Head of the International Affairs Division at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C., the world's largest business association. He provides strategic direction to over 80 regional and industry experts working to advance transparent, rules-based trade and investment policies around the globe. Previously, he served as the Chamber's Vice President for Asia. So to start us off, back to you, Mary, and thank you again for having me and Autodesk as a participant in this session.
Thanks so much, Andrew. We want to get to our speakers, but I want to frame a little bit what we're talking about. We know that this series, and indeed our organization at the moment, is about the persistence of international engagement. And we know the pandemic will end, but we don't know yet how international engagement will reemerge in the post-COVID world. So in this series, we've looked at diplomacy and national security, And today we're looking at the aspects of international engagement that in many ways are most important to our daily lives and to our view of the world: tourism and international business. How do we think about the loss that we've experienced in these domains, and how do we think about recovery and re-engagement, particularly here in the US, where we have a new administration? So to start us off, if I may, I'd like to go to Secretary General Pololikashvili, and I will tell our audience ahead of time that I checked with the staff members of both of these distinguished gentlemen, and they invited me to call them by their first names. So Zurab, I hope you don't mind that I call you Zurab, and welcome to World Boston. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I will call you Mary then, and to you and to all colleagues, World Boston, to Mr. Brilliant, all of participants to give me this opportunity. We try to do it before Christmas. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. But we are here. I'm very glad to have you. And it's an honor to participate in this very important discussion. As you well mentioned, Mary, we are living in very weird times. And I think that we are not still in post-COVID period, because we had the first wave, then second wave, then third wave, and we don't know where we are. So, of course, tourism industry never had this kind of crisis like it had, and it's still crisis. I always mention it, it's just starting, and it's very important to talk and to have this kind of communication, especially with private sector, who was mostly affected from the crisis was and is. First is private sector, the second the people who are working in the sector and the industry. So for me it's very important day, and I want to greet you from Madrid. Thank you to give me this possibility to participate in this meeting. Today the world is at a standstill, and it's people who suffer and the communities which depend on tourism. Tourism means jobs, investments, infrastructure, agriculture, energy, management, innovation, digital transformation. These are all topics where we are focused, and we will be focused during next years. But tourism means transportation and communication. As a sector, it probably has a value chain like no other, and its social footprint is deep. That is why tourism is a lifeline for many millions, a leading provider of opportunity and a pillar of sustainable development. The COVID crisis and tourism, let's say. Today, UNWTO released data for 2020. International tourist arrivals fell by almost 75% last year. It's quite a big number. 75%, we're talking about 1 billion of travelers worldwide. We estimate then up to 120 million direct tourism jobs have been put at risk, and with them many millions of businesses too, as I mentioned before. And directly, business and jobs that also rely on tourism have been hit hard. Everyone from the fishermen who sell to hotels, to taxi drivers, retailers, the list of long and diverse. So we risk losing a lot of more of we don't restart tourism as soon as is safely possible. 80% of tourists rest on the shoulders of small and medium-sized companies. So the social impact is huge. And that is why tourism is a proven driver of opportunity for youth employment and education, and for gender equality. In many places of the world, our sector also plays a key role in protecting cultural and natural heritage. So we work in leadership, and it's very important. And our organization, a specialized agency, is fostering sustainable development through tourism. Our organization is working with the wider United Nations system, as well as with other international organizations, destinations, and businesses. So I'm really happy to have Chamber of Commerce in front of us. I really hope that our relationship will continue. I'm ready, and I'm sure that we will organize a visit to you, and we can talk about more things and more. I want to introduce more information and in more details what we are doing, because we have numbers of diverse activities, and we all have a part to play in restarting tourism firstly through harmonizing actions and protocols, and then through restoring trust in international travel. And I think we must be ready to deliver what is needed: trust, jobs, services, and fast economic impact. My vision builds on that and has several key ingredients. Innovation. Tourism is always ahead of the curve in business models and how people interact. The second is education. We lead the way for quality education in tourism, youth, and jobs. With education opportunities come value-added jobs. Investments will be very important next 2-3 years. It's a key to generate opportunities based on innovative ideas and solid human capital. Data, there we are quite well and quite strong. We are the one-stop shop for tourism intelligence, helping leaders make evidence-based decisions. Restart tourism will be the most important focus for our activity. The restart of tourism is vital for all the reasons I have listed. So if we see the pandemic as a great disruption to our economies and societies, the restart of tourism is essential to help us all get back on track. So maybe you don't know, we starting from the beginning of pandemic, we created crisis committee. We are still working with our international organizations. And what is our main objective for next 4, 6, 7 months, I would say, to create harmonized protocols and to standards how people will travel tomorrow. Mary asked in her introduction. We have to establish some concrete rules for all the world, not only for 2 countries or 1 region or numbers of countries. This is not easy. That's why we need support from WHO. We are working very hard, really, with all international organizations to put them at the same table, and we did it. By the way, from the United States, we have a very active partner, which is CLIA. The cruise business is another very important part of tourism. 25% of tourists are traveling by seaside. And I hope that very soon we will establish some concrete rules, which is, again, it's not easy. Now vaccination process started. This is another optimistic signal for all of us. But again, we don't know yet. And if we will not start today working and thinking what will be the protocols and standards for vaccinated people, people will vaccinate it, but it will be the same situation like we have with PCRs. So we need some more clearness how people will start, and vaccination will be very big push and very positive step, people starting to travel. Restrictions and to close countries and borders, my opinion is that it's not a solution, because now all the world is in COVID. We can't say there will be some 4, 5, 7 countries where is not COVID today, but everywhere we have COVID. So restrictions and closing the doors, it's not a solution. We are closing restaurants, we are closing business entities with the revenues with these entities, people and families are living. Imagine what is happening. Just a quick example, which is very close to you, Caribbean countries, that the 90% of their activities and income depends on tourism. So who cares about these countries? Who is taking responsibility of these families and their millions? So we have to maintain and find the balance between health issues and business issues, let's say. So this is our role. It's not easy. Again, you know, the world was lost in March, in April, in May. So many new ideas, so many new developments. But again, I think, and I really see the chaos and this kind of communications and this kind of meetings, we have to convert in the concrete results. I'm sorry for this emotional speech, because tourism needs a little bit push, and as much we will sleep, as difficult will be to restart tourism. Thank you for your attention. It's a pleasure to participate in today's meeting, and hope to see you soon in Washington. We always will be happy to receive you like our friends, like our partners, and of course, United States is top destination, top market, top innovator, and we need your support and we need your vision. How do you see to restart tourism?
Thank you so much, Zurab. And when you go to DC, remember it's very easy to get to Boston, which is a fabulous tourist destination. We've actually been hit very hard in our tourism sector because we're a fly-in destination, not a drive-in. Anyway, thank you for that perspective. I want to turn now to Myron, and if you can give us.
I forgot one very important topic. I'm sorry, that we will be focused a lot in education, as I mentioned, but at the same time we will be focused a lot in rural tourism. So rural tourism, we saw that in the summertime people started traveling inside of the countries and the rural part of their country. So there is a huge space to invest. There is a huge space to educate people, and there is a huge place to create new jobs. So this will be our target for next 2-3 years, and we are collaborating a lot. That's why I need the long meeting with you to explain that we are collaborating with FAO, with different governments. So many interesting things is happening around us, but we will focus the regional development and rural tourism in all the world.
Excellent.
Sorry for my intervention.
Thank you very much. So Myron, I'm wondering if you could give us your organization's perspective on our American business priorities for recovery and re-engagement in global business.
So Mary, first off, it's a pleasure to be here. And I know the important work that World Boston does. And of course, I'm very biased towards your organization because you have a great board. Andrew, I've known since he was in the Clinton administration, and I know the important leadership role he's played in the important company that's on your board. And of course, you have another board member out there in the audience today who worked for me for 7 years. I need to always remind everyone that I'm proud of the people that used to work for me and survived me. And this one is Leslie Griffin, who's up in Boston. I have a personal desire to just mention that Boston has a special place for me because my father grew up as a Boston Red Sox fan. And so I know the importance of Boston as a commercial center, a finance center, and of course, as a center for tourism. And I know, like many other parts of the country, COVID has hit Boston. Businesses have struggled, small businesses in the service sector. And I'll talk about that in the context of talking about what we face as a country. But Mary, thank you for inviting me in. And Andrew, thank you for your kind introduction. And Zurab, I listened to what you said about the work of the UN. I will tell you, the UN has been a great partner to us on many projects over the past. I've known a number of your secretary generals very closely, like Ban Ki-moon. And part of that is because, as Andrew said at the outset, the US Chamber has not only the largest footprint of any organization in the United States, with state and local chambers and small and medium-sized businesses and large companies as part of our membership, but we have a global presence, a very significant one. We have American chambers operating in over 100 countries. We have bilateral business councils that we run with over 20 countries now, and we are active in about 50 countries ourselves on an annual basis. So we know very much firsthand the importance of connectivity and how much the world has changed during this COVID period. Some positive changes, the acceleration of digitalization, but also some challenges. Clearly, the health challenge that we all face in this country is not unique to us. The pandemic is not a US only concern, it's a global concern. So the first challenge we face as a business community is how do we support our government in the United States, President Biden and the new team, but also around the world. How do we ensure vaccines are distributed and utilized by our citizens, that we create a safe environment for business to get back to work, for small businesses to start again, to get those 10 million jobs that have been lost back, getting those people working, the families that have been hurt through this time. It's been a terrifically difficult time for so many people around this country in so many ways. So we're very cognizant of that. So the first challenge, I think, and the first challenge of this administration has been to put together a stimulus package and see what they can do with it. The first offer is 1.9 trillion. I'm not here today to tell you what that package will be. I think it's going to take time, but there are critical elements of that package that are about making sure that the states, local governments are working very effectively with the federal government so that we deal with eradicating both the vaccine dynamic, which is meaning getting vaccines out and distributed, but eradicating the challenges we face in our economy. We need to bring vitality back. So job number one is to work with the administration, work with the US Congress on ensuring we address the pandemic in a whole holistic fashion, and also remind everyone of our global responsibilities, America's leadership in the world in this endeavor, working with Europeans, working frankly with our friends across the world, including, by the way, with China. And this means being part of international organizations like the World Health Organization. It means being part of COVAX. That organization is helping distribute drugs around the world. If vaccines are only distributed across the United States and across Europe, we will not get through this pandemic, and we will not see business travel. We will not see tourism. And if you are interested in this topic because you're directly involved, then you share this concern that all of us have, that countries in Africa, in Latin America, and other parts of the world, which don't have the same healthcare facilities, that don't have the same capacity, need the help of America today, even while we're inward focused about our own domestic challenges. Second component of our plan is obviously to invest in our future. Investing in our future means investing in infrastructure. This is a high priority for the incoming administration. This is an area where there's bipartisan support. How you pay for infrastructure will be a challenge, but everyone agrees we need to upscale our roads, our airports, our train stations, all aspects, including the information technology, the IT backbone of our economy, the telecommunication infrastructure. So we need to move more to a 5G platform. So these are areas of great interest. The third challenge for us is immigration. Why immigration is important? Because we have the right immigration policies. We're going to deal with some of the shortages we have in our own country. With infrastructure, we don't have enough workers to help work the roads and create the necessary jobs that will help fuel other jobs in our economy. So we need to get the right sensible immigration package before the Congress. The US Chamber will be committed to that, working with the Biden administration. There are many other areas. Climate is obviously a high priority issue. So is workforce, talent development, big areas, big challenges. And finally, trade. Now, it's a good news, bad news story on trade. Certainly, global trade has been down about 7%, but you could say it could have been much worse, right? I mean, the reality is 7% trade being down in 2020. A lot of people were thinking it'd be 30%, 40% even. So in the end of the day, while global travel stopped, global business did not stop during this period of time. And I hope that we see the continuation of policies that will encourage the flow of goods and services, and that will have policies in countries, including the United States, that don't restrict trade flows and don't restrict ultimately people traveling. The travel bans will be in place for a while. We know that in Europe, in the United States, and other places. The quarantine practices will be in place as well. But I want to say something about the service sector, and then I want to end with 4 areas that could be part of our conversation. The service sector represents about 1/3 of the jobs that have been lost in the United States. There are 10 million jobs roughly that have been lost. 1/3 of those jobs are in the service sector. And I'm very concerned about a K recovery. We are going to have a rebound in our economy as we come out of this pandemic, and we will get out of this pandemic to the other side, as Zurab said. But it will take time. But what I'm concerned about is the economic rift in our society, as exemplified by the last year in our country, and frankly, the last several years, isn't going to get any better if the recovery doesn't come across the country, if all people don't benefit and see that response. And right now, we have a market that is going up, but not everyone is in the market as an active player. And there are a lot of people at home who are struggling week to week, month to month to make things work. So I'm very worried about those blue collar jobs as much as the white collar jobs that have been lost in this economy. and a lot of the service sector, restaurants, hotels, airlines, these people are struggling and without jobs. And in DC, tourism is a big part of our sector. 50% of all job losses in Washington, DC, in the area, is in the tourism sector. My guess is in Boston, it's probably 30% of the jobs in Boston or something of that level. Very significant. And clearly, if you're looking at Las Vegas, if you're looking at places like New York, again, the impact is very significant. And so we have to work together. Business of tourism is a huge business in our country, as it is in Europe, as it is in Asia. And as we have travel restrictions, we're also limiting the ability of people who want to spend money in this field to come to our country, right? More and more Chinese are traveling around the world. They're going to stay local. So let me give you 4 factors that I think we all are thinking about when we think about tourism. And then I'll turn it back to Mary. 1, how quickly do we recover from the crisis from a health and economic standpoint? How resilient are businesses in the broader tourism ecosystem? Government support will not go on forever. Some businesses have been very prudent, right? They stayed open, but they reduced the amount of people working, but they kept people engaged and they kept their businesses. Others have closed down. There'll be new business opportunities. Certainly, a lot of people are doing online business, and there'll be a big opportunity for service providers online. But what happens to the restaurants and the hotels coming out of this crisis? Second, what's the longer term economic impact? Those who took a hit during COVID reduced their spending long term and focused more on savings. Do we change the mentality of that coming out of COVID? Do we get people to invest more and make commitments to travel and to visit places, to see their family and their friends, and to see the sights across this beautiful country and around the world? How quickly do we get that back? Third, what's the unseen psychological impact of this all? How do people behave once a crisis is over and the risks are reduced? I mean, how quickly? Now, let me just make this point. After 9/11, it took 2 years to see travel resume like it had been pre-9/11. My guess is it's going to take another 2 years. So if you predict that sometime at the end of 21, we'll get through the essential phase 3 of this pandemic, meaning vaccines are widely distributed, people are mostly vaccinated. Not everyone will be vaccinated, but mostly. We've created the safeguards for businesses to reopen. We've created protections, liability protections, and other means to allow for that to happen. But the psychology impact, how quickly are people going to go and spend in this era? And how are they going to spend their money? Not just whether they're going to spend, but how. Do they do their practices? Are their practices different? And then how does the rest of the world fare? Likely to be uneven, a long recovery for many parts of the world, including in Africa and in Latin America. So how does that impact US tourism, even after the US domestic recovery? I'm mindful, for example, of the Koreans and the Brazilians who fly into New York and go shopping for a week and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. They're not coming anytime soon. And maybe they're not coming back anytime soon. So what's the psychological impact is one piece of it. But the reality is that a lot of these countries are hurting even worse than we are, as hard as that is to believe. So I'll leave you with that, Mary. I'm delighted to be a part of this forum. There's a lot to be thinking about. And of course, a lot of work in the policy arena. And, you know, this is a difficult political environment, but one hopes that politics aside, we learn how to work together to get through this period, deal with the social inclusiveness that we need and economic inclusiveness that we need in our agenda. And we find a way to work through the pandemic and get to the other side in a stronger place. That's my hope. Mary?
Great. Thank you very much, both of you. I have actually many questions for both of you, but we also see questions in our audience. So I'll limit myself. Zurab, I wanted to come back to you for just a moment and ask you what do you see as likely likely signposts along the road to recovery in tourism. Some countries are still investing very heavily in tourism. For example, Saudi Arabia, massive building projects. What should we be looking for as I said, as signposts that people are going to return to tourism? Is it simply numbers of vaccinations, or are there other indicators?
Proud and happy that we are part of Saudi Arabia's investment, and in March we are going to open our representative office in Riyadh.
Wow.
You mentioned, well, it's something very different and mega is happening in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure that in next 4 or 5 years it will be absolutely new, innovative, and something really different tourism destination worldwide. I want to mention just very quickly the main lines made by Mr. Brilliant, and talking about Brazilians, why they are not coming to United States now. I mean, many restrictions, and I absolutely agree with you that mentality of tourists it change a lot, and in long term it will change more. But again, restrictions and confusions which people have, it stop a lot businesses, it stop a lot people traveling. Why? Because they don't know if he or she will come to any countries and she will see, or one day she will saw that he has a COVID, what will happen with them then, you know? There are many confusions and many uncertainties which unfortunately stop and making people stop traveling. So I'm sure that once we will have clear protocols again and clear rules, how can we travel tomorrow, plus vaccination process, it will push and it will help people traveling worldwide. So
Zurab, can I just jump in here for a second? I wasn't talking about the next 6 months. I was talking about post this period. It will still take time for people to re-engage. But I think even more than vaccines, we also need adequate and efficient testing to complement vaccines, because not everyone is going to be vaccinated. So we have to assume that some portion of the world will not. Therefore, safeguards will have to be put up, as you know, with airlines and others in concert with governments. And governments will have to agree on a structure that allows for travel without the 100% certainty that everyone's been vaccinated who is traveling. So some testing will have to continue to go on for the foreseeable future. That's all I was suggesting.
No, absolutely agree. These quarantines and these confusions again, but people make it in long term. That's why it's very important to have some communication and to plan something in long term, because once people start and they started to vaccinate, there is no rules how they can travel tomorrow again. So psychological impact, again, absolutely agree that first people has to change their psychological approach regarding traveling. Traveling, it's not, or not traveling, it's not a solution from COVID, because I think it's safe to travel today. Today it's safe to travel, and you can be in troubles in supermarket, you can take the COVID in supermarket, you can take it in pharmacy here in Madrid. I travel in Brazil, I travel all around the world the last 6 months, and I feel much more safer during the trips at the plane when I know that all the plane they did PCR 2 days before, than somewhere here in Madrid going to some places where I'm living now. So I think with the time, in long run, step by step, we will learn more, we will be more responsible, we will have more data, we will have more new products, new ways to travel, and step by step we will get back to the normality. No one likes this new normality, and everyone wants to travel. This is we know and we see. So first, what people want to do tomorrow is to travel. So, but again, the mentality of tourists will change. The age of tourists will change. This is clear that young people will travel more than the old one. old people have more money than young people. This is also we have to analyze. I mean, many things will change worldwide. The regions, the markets will change, the countries will compete, and this competition process started already because all countries now starting everything from scratch. 1 year before, 90% of questions I received was about over-tourism. 90% of journalists, they were asking, what do you think about over-tourism? Now we're starting everything from scratch. So many things will change, and we are living in a very challenging time, and this is our main role, I think. Unfortunately, I forgot to mention at the beginning that United States, like a member, United States is not a member of our organization. We have very good news that last year we started very active process with administration. It nothing to do with elections or new or old administration. I'm really looking forward that United States will become a very active member of our organization, and we have a lot of things to learn to export from United States for other 160 member states because they need it. They need this know-how. They need this kind of support, and I'm pretty sure that very soon the new administration will make a decision to join us.
Mary, can I just comment quickly a couple of the points and then turn back to you? So first of all, there's short-term issues, right? People aren't traveling to see their parents or their friends because they're quarantines in cities, right? So short-term, we have issues like quarantines. If I want to go to New York to see my 90-year-old parents, I have to quarantine, I have to get tested. And those are practical restrictions on a lot of people. They can't spend 4 days in a hotel or hang out for a week to see their parents in New York or wherever they live. So there's short-term issues. We'll get through those short-term issues in due course. But there are longer-term issues. I traveled 50, 60% of my time business class. I actually help support youth travel around the world because people don't make their money, the airlines don't make their money off tourist travel. They make their money off people like me traveling on very expensive business and first class tickets. And so if I don't have to do that as much because I can now use Zoom or Microsoft Teams or some other platform to do half the meetings I used to, I'm not going to travel as much because businesses are setting in a new model for working. So that has some impact, indirect and direct impact on tourism that you just have to factor in. Third is cities are going to have to be more innovative about how they market themselves to attract tourists. It's not pre-COVID. It is not going to be the same, and it's going to take many years to recover. I'm a big fan. I grew up living in Europe. I have traveled to maybe 70 countries through this job. I love traveling around the world, and I love traveling around the United States. But to think it's not going to be significantly altered by what we've just come through, I think is missing, the environment that not only we're in today, but the environment we're going to be in 22 and 23 and perhaps even 24. So what I think is really important is for the ecosystem of a community like Boston to be getting out ahead of this narrative, thinking through how it can get ahead and what will make Boston attractive, not just to local tourists, but to a wider variety of tourists is very critical in this time. So I think it's a challenge for everyone.
Great, thank you both. I knew that you were both very interesting people, and I am right. Good reflection from both of you. I'm going to cede my questions to our audience since I know we're all busy. Lots of topics I'd love to come back to, like competitiveness and equity and U.S. leadership. However, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to first question from Jared, who is a World Boston board member, among other things, and honorary consul of Georgia, and has probably a question or two. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Let me first say, as a business owner and a member of the American Chamber of Commerce of Georgia abroad for many years, I like the dichotomy between the two speakers, AmCham member and Zurab's home country of Georgia. So great. Thanks for both the speakers. My question is more around we're talking a bit around insular nations becoming a bit isolationist, and then other ones that are being a bit more adaptive and agile and traveling and getting past this in the new norm, as we said. So Zurab, you talked about standardized protocols, and Myron, you talked about economic rift. Can each of you tell me or tell us a bit more around what you're seeing in countries that are becoming more adaptive? Yeah, the ones that are traveling right now, the ones that are opening up for business or business travel or international tourism. I think that would be very telling to the audience if you both could speak to that, what you're seeing in other countries.
Go ahead, Zurab.
Thank you. I was thinking that you were asking Georgian. So, very happy to greet you. I think that always example talking from Madrid and from tourism industry will be example, and we saw first steps to restart and reopening tourism from European Union and from Europe. Europe itself is most visited region and most developed region and continent in tourism infrastructure for health infrastructure, and European Union one of the first who made very not optimistic declaration in March and April, but European Union was one of the first to establish first kind of procedures, first funding to support countries and to support private sector. European Union established first this color protocols and color marks for different countries, and I think that the European Union and Europe will be one of the first place which will open. Of course, it depends a lot the development and next years of tourism, how fast and how quickly will be open the big markets, like of course United States will be another big leader and big supporter and big and most important example how to open for the rest of the world. And then of course it's very important the big markets like China, like Middle East countries, Russia. Everywhere we have different approaches, but again, European Union, I think, will be one of the first who will give and who is working on it, how to open and how to restart tourism. It's very weird talking about these things because now we see that many countries are locked down again, the borders are closed, airports are closed, but again, the first restarting tourism I see again in Europe and the United States.
Okay, great.
Many cases, many countries are looking on this kind of experiences, let's say this kind of leadership, because unfortunately today one guy or one country say one thing and all of them they are copying the same. This is the reality. We saw with 2 or 3 declarations we can close the countries and open it. It was always very difficult. So this is realism where we are living now.
Thank you. All right, we do have another question. I realize we're short on time, so thank you for that. We're going to go to Andrew.
Yep, thank you, Mary, and thank you both, Secretary General Myron. Really quickly, a mechanical or logistical question. Mr. Secretary General, do you imagine that there will be a standardized immunization passport, for example, something that the UN will endorse as a way to guarantee that travelers have been immunized? And is that something that you're working on now?
Our one of the first initiative in April, we recommended to have we can't call it passport, but some ID which shows you your history during COVID. Same for vaccination. Now we need this kind of database because without it, I see that and we see that it will be very difficult to travel. But unfortunately, it's not depends on us. We always give recommendations to countries to other organizations, but some big players has to agree. This is very difficult. Why? Because first of all countries are looking first to WHO, and WHO is not oriented about travel and tourism industry. WHO is oriented to have less COVID cases. The first and the second, now it's oriented on vaccination process. So it's not their job. They are quite, let's say, concerned, and it's a negotiation process. But I am very pro to have some database, global one, even for regions, even for individual countries, to have some database, because it will facilitate people to travel. I know personally people who had COVID 1-2 months ago, but they don't have any priorities. They don't have any fixed memory to use it traveling tomorrow. If they want to travel tomorrow, they have to take PCR test every time they will travel. Same will happen with the vaccination process. If there is no database, the people who will be vaccinated, they will be same like the rest. So of course, there is a need to have one kind of passport. Same, I don't want to compare, but same we have it for Africa continent because of yellow fever.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean,
Yeah, Myron, sorry, were you going to comment on the passport?
no, I mean,
Okay.
I would add some, but go ahead. I know you have more
Well,
questions.
I actually had a question for you, and we have a lot of questions and not very much time, but we're looking forward to when we all go back to traveling. But I wanted to ask you, Myron, on the way, we are all much more digital than we ever were before,
Right.
and that also means we're a lot more exposed as businesses, as individuals, et cetera. So I'm just wondering kind of how you're seeing your members respond to our needs in this increasingly digital world, what your priorities for policy are, and what digital trade is looking like in the absence of or filling in for some in-person business that we used to do. So that's a big question.
Mary, the issue of data privacy and data governance and digital taxes and many other issues that are incorporated in your question are themselves the subject of a long,
enormous, yes,
conference. But let me just hit a couple points. One is that it's imperative that we make sure that we take full advantage of the acceleration of digitalization in our economy and around the world, right? Globalization means many things to many people, but one thing I would say about digitalization, as Tom Friedman said the other day to me, the reason I wrote the book, The World is Flat, is because I was trying to press upon everyone that in many ways the world is flat. But I wrote that book before we were in the internet age. And the reality is today, the world is flat in many ways, right? Someone in South Africa connect with someone in Topeka, Kansas, and do a business transaction. So that's very good for people who want to be creative and create businesses online. So it's a platform that can really make it possible to sell something across the world in ways that we couldn't do that before. However, there are issues around who owns the data. There are issues around how you govern data. How do you see the differences in jurisdictional approaches between, say, Europe and the United States, certainly between the United States and China? We've seen that with, over the apps, over Huawei and other issues. And so these are complex issues that don't just touch on different views about consumer protections, but also touch upon national security and commerce issues. We don't have time to get into it, but I'll simply say that one of the critical things that the United States has to do is, of course, enhance our own competitiveness. But to do that, that means that we have to make investments in science and AI and new energy vehicles in all these things. So there's a huge opportunity in that field. There's also the reality that we have to work effectively with the Europeans and others to create global standards that will ensure consumer protections, allow people around the world to set up businesses and have the security to know that they can deal with other people around the world under some kind of standards that everyone agrees to. Getting there is going to be a long road. It's going to be a complicated road, and it has to do with different ways that we police and manage our data flows. And of course, we're seeing the debates in our own country. But I do think for the service industry, it is something that is going to be critical, because you have to offer, the ecosystem of tourism is more than just visiting a physical property, right? It's the hotel business, it's the online travel agency, it's obviously the restaurant business that's going on more online. It's so many pieces. So as a consequence, being part of that ecosystem requires understanding the tools that are now available to allow you to do your business in a more efficient way, a more cost-efficient way, which has a job dynamic, but also recognizing that there are vulnerabilities in the system. And that's where cyber policy, where data policy will play a role. And certainly these are big issues for Washington policymakers, stakeholders to invest in, and they're big issues for us to collaborate. Just on the travel thing, real quickly, Zurab, we have to have some kind of certainty. The business community, people traveling as tourists want some kind of certainty, and governments need that. So we do need to have some kind of agreed upon form, as Andrew suggested, just like a yellow fever shot. So when you enter a country, you don't have to go through a 7-day quarantine just because they're not certain that you aren't carrying COVID-19 or some variant of it. And this is going to require close cooperation. As we talk about the G20 and other organizations providing a framework for the major economies in the world to share in macroeconomic coordination, we need the WHO and other organizations to reform and step up to the plate to be places, not alone, places with the State Department, the Commerce Department, our country, and others to find a way to create these guidelines so we can resume travel at the earliest possible way and make sure that people feel comfortable and confident that when they travel, that they have their own safety at hand, but also the safety of others.
Okay, thank you. I wish we had a lot more time. There is a lot to talk about here. We are so fortunate to have had Secretary General Pololikashvili and Myron Brilliant of the US Chamber. It occurred to me as you're both talking, these are the arenas, international business and tourism, where we are experiencing how leadership is going to play out on a daily basis, how competition, global competition and collaboration are going to play out, how big questions of equity are going to play out that directly touch our lives. So you are both leaving us with a lot to think about. I know we had more questions, but we're a little bit over time, unfortunately, already. One suggestion that I have is please to stay internationally engaged. We do have upcoming events. With that, thank you very much to our speakers, also to our wonderful sponsor, and to all of you who joined. Thank you, and see you next time at World Boston.
I want to thank you again, our mutual friend, dear Minor, our friend Michael Babuna Janeliza, who organized this. I'm really very happy to be and to have new friends in the United States, and be sure that we will come to you. You always will be more than welcome in Madrid, and let's continue this interesting talks, converting in the results. I'm sure that we can do many interesting things together and count on our full friendship and our full support as always.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Myron. Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.